Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you very much to this organization to have me here and to give me this chance to make presentation in front of this venue. The topic that I want to talk today about is economic and political reshuffle that I believe is happening in the world right now, and what to do about it, how to survive this reshuffle. I believe that every 30 to 40 years, there is a political economic reshuffle that is happening in the world, which has its own losers and winners. To give you a couple of examples, for example, just after Second World War, there was a major political reshuffle. Breaking down of Soviet Union was also major political and financial economic reshuffle that has had its own losers and winners. I believe that right now we are entering one more political and economic reshuffle, and which can be very, very interesting one, but also very, very dangerous, especially for developing countries. So what is happening right now, if you look at the situation politically, we have this more of a nationalistic themes that are becoming very, very popular especially in developed countries in Europe and the United States. We have this Brexit type of situation, which is also developing in other countries in Europe. We have Russia becoming also very, very active in international political scene. On the other hand, in economy, we have a situation where oil prices had its own shock on economies of many developing countries in the region. But more importantly, very, very much more importantly, you have technological developments. And what is happening with technological developments, what it brings to the world is the following. It brings more focus and more foreign direct investment flow into developed world rather than into developing countries. And it is the situation where we have and by the way, we can actually very clearly see this technological change. This is top 10 biggest companies in the world in 2010, 2015, and 2017. In 2010, out of top 10 richest companies in the world, there were only 2 technological companies. In 2017, you have already 7 technological companies, and plus Berkshire Hathaway, which is, by the way, 20-25% also technological company. So I believe that within next 2 to 3 years' time, in 2020, we will have all top 10 companies will be technological. So this is happening in just recently, in just 5 to 6, 7 years' time. What does it mean to the world? It means that people, investors, would prefer to buy the most difficult land in California, pay highest taxes in California, hire most expensive entrepreneurs or most expensive labor in California, and still make huge money. And if in the past, developing world, like post-Soviet Union, like Africa, like Asia, we are attractive for global investors, and money is within global investors, within global funds. Developing countries are not rich countries. They cannot bring investment funds. So money which is in London, New York, or wherever it is, those money were used to go to developing world for few reasons. They were used to go there because land was cheap, labor was cheap, taxes were low, and they could make money. They could make money on these investments. Now, the trend is totally different. Now, you'll see that only during the last 3 years, you have a situation where more money is going to developed world and less money is going to developing countries. And unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, this trend will continue. This is our forecast, that this trend will continue because this reshuffle is ongoing reshuffle. We are just in the start of this global economic reshuffle, and it's going to continue. So here's the question. What's going to happen with developing countries? What's going to happen with Africa? What's going to happen with the post-Soviet Union countries? What's going to happen with Asia, where there will be less and less inflow in these countries? Probably. With the trends that we see right now, it's going to happen. Where there will be less and less FDI. And I'm not talking about FDI only because of money flow. I'm talking about FDI as one of the main sources of know-how transfer. Let's face it. Most of the developing world are not technological developers. They are technological users. And in order for them to develop some kind of know-how, they need FDI. They need American, Japanese, other British companies coming in, building factories, transferring know-how, and teaching a local population with the new for the new technologies. And this is going to be the biggest problem. So, in this situation, what is the solution? What government should do? What international financial organizations should do? By the way, when I talk about IFIs, I mean World Bank, I mean EBRD, EIB, all these international financial institutions, who, by the way, have played very, very interesting role and very important role up to now in developing countries. I mean, we can see serious reduction of poverty. We can see serious economic growth of developing countries. But now, is it time now for them to change? And I think the answer is yes. The answer is yes, because IFI is becoming outdated. Their policies, their ways of intervening in developing world is becoming outdated. They need to adopt new policies. Governments, on the other hand, have to adopt also new policies. It's impossible to survive as they have been doing up to now. The situation is totally new. And what I mean by new policies of governments, I call it Georgian reforms. It's very selfish. It's very selfish from my side to call this type of package of reforms Georgia reforms. But I'll give you a couple of figures for you to have idea. Georgia's transformation in 2004-2010 was a truly fundamental transformation, which can be very much learned from Georgia by almost any developing country. Right now, I have my own company, Reformatics, and we advise many governments in the world on business environment, on economic transformation. And we can actually see that Georgia reforms can work well in almost any developing country, in Africa, be it in Asia, or maybe in Latin America. What do I mean by these Georgia reforms is the following. Imagine Georgia was named as one of the most corrupt countries in the world in 2003. Out of 132 countries that was reviewed by Transparency International, Georgia was on 128th place. Can you imagine? We were amongst the champions of corruption. If there was a world championship in corruption, Georgia would have been in finals definitely. Maybe playing against Nigeria in finals and losing or drawing. The only countries that were behind us in 2003 were Nigeria, Tajikistan, and I think Haiti. That's it. And Bangladesh. These were the only countries behind Georgia in 2004. In 2007, and this is only 2-3 year period, 2007, Georgia was amongst top 50 least corrupt countries in the world. In 2010, Transparency International did a review of 180 countries, asking one and the same question: have you or member of your family paid bribe in past 12 months? In Georgia, only 5% said yes in 2010. We are talking about only 5 to 6 months period. EU average was 5%. US was 5%. Georgia's only 4% said yes. EU average was 5%. US was 5%. The only countries that did better than us were actually Nordic countries, Scandinavian countries, Belgium, Netherlands, South Korea, UK, which I don't believe, by the way, Singapore, Canada, New Zealand, Australia. That's it. We were amongst top 20 least corrupt countries in 2010. That's one example. This is what I mean by Georgian-style reform. Second example is doing business report. I don't know if you know it or not, but the World Bank produces this doing business report, which I believe is quite good parameter how to identify countries' situation and countries' rules and regulations. And according to the doing business report, Georgia was 112th in 2004. Only within 5 years' time, Georgia was in top 10. Georgia was number 8. And Georgia was the only country, and until now is the only developing country reaching top 10 in this report, since this report exists. So number 1 is Singapore, number 2 is New Zealand, Hong Kong, UK, United States, Finland, South Korea, Georgia. And this is This is type of reforms that I'm talking about. And governments need and have to adapt these reforms as soon as possible if they want to survive. If they don't do this, there will be a worse and worse situation in many developing countries because money will not be coming. Money will be going to the developed world. Of course, there are new developing banks, there's Chinese, Asian. This money maybe will balance out these private investment funds at some period of time, but eventually the end result will definitely be that there will be less and less money flowing towards inefficient governments, inefficient economies, and there will be more money flowing towards California, United States, in total, UK, and so on and so on. This type of reforms that I'm talking about is actually debottlenecks private sector. It actually makes SMEs and private sector much more active, and they contribute to the economy, and they bring themselves FDI, and they bring themselves international investors and then know-how transfer. But what about IFIs? What can IFIs do in this kind of situation? And I'll try to be brief. I don't think I have much time, but I think that there are new policies that IFI needs to adopt as soon as possible, and these are the 3 or 4 different directions just to give you ideas of possible IFI development. One is IPPP, which is I call IFI public-private partnership. There is less money flowing towards developing countries. We need IFIs to give some kind of assurances, some kind of guarantees to private sector to invest to developing world. They don't need to cough out whole money themselves, IFIs. They don't have unlimited resources either. All they need is to give political insurances to international investors, for international investors, private sector, to become more and more active towards developing world. We need IFIs to help governments to create so-called PME sector, and this is also a new term. It's publicly traded medium-sized companies. IFIs like EBRD and World Bank need to co-finance or finance transformation of so-called family type of companies into corporations in developing world, because this is not happening. This is something where developing countries have got stuck. Even in Eastern Europe, which is much more developed than Africa or many former Soviet Union countries, even in Eastern Europe, we have a problem of transforming family type of companies into corporations. It's not happening. In Hungary, it's not happening. In Bulgaria, it's not happening. So we need IFIs helping with this transformation, which also will bring additional investors and which also will bring additional FDI to developing world. And finally, we need IFIs helping private sector with transformation of state-owned enterprises. I believe that state-owned enterprises in developing countries is the biggest inefficiency of the world. I believe the world is losing huge potential growth, additional, maybe 1/3 at least of current growth, which is not utilized because of corruption or because of inefficiencies of state-owned enterprises of developing countries. And if you fix that, you will have much faster growth and much better investment attraction. So I'm talking about IFIs working harder and better with the state-owned enterprises in the developing countries. We need new formulas for PPPs. And by the way, I've seen many PPPs gone wrong. PPP is like, if PPP goes wrong, it's like bad marriage. It's you are stuck with persons that you don't want to live with, but divorce is very costly. By the way, I'm very happily married. But like I've heard these stories. So wrongly arranged PPP is a disaster for a country, and I've seen that. And wrongly arranged PPP, why PPPs go wrong? Main reason why they go wrong is because of corruption, actually, because of not transparent and not competitive process that has been managed for the PPP. So I believe that IFI's introduction of more active into PPP arrangement should play a very significant role. And finally, And by the way, this is, if anybody will be interested, you will be able to find this on the website. This is a formula that we are saying that in practice, this formula works very well because we've done it in Georgia a few times. This is formula for PPP, which gives equal opportunity to all potential investors, which develops a new product and which brings new investors into the investments into the country. Just briefly explain what I mean by that. For example, when we wanted to build one of the largest hydropower plants in Georgia, we created a state-owned company, and we gave all the licenses, permits, land, everything to this company. By the way, this is the portion of development of any project which all of the investors hate. The first 6 months, first 9 months of the project development is hated by all the investors because this is time when investors have to go to many different agencies and many different ministries. So government does all that, then does a roadshow, attracts best possible investors from private sector, and has an auction saying that I'm selling 51% of this project. I'm going to co-finance, but whoever will offer to buy higher percent of this company will win this company. Whoever will make me put less money will win this project. And with this auction, you actually have identify very fair value of the project, and private sector gets the project to develop, but private sector has obligation to buy government out within 5 years' time. And then this money goes to new project. So this is type of formulas that we are talking about, which I believe will lead into bringing new types of investors into developing world and may avoid this kind of catastrophic situation which may happen because of technological development. And finally, this is the last slide, finally I believe that it's time to develop investor banking boutiques which are very much focused on PPP projects, because these are very difficult transactions in many cases, and these are transactions where I believe governments need significant help. And we in Reformatics, actually, we have already created a new company called 3P Reformatics, where we are starting also to work with governments on developing new PPP projects. So this is, I hope these are type of scenarios and ways how to avoid drastic decrease of foreign direct investments into the developing world. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Gilauri. That is a sort of coincidence, you know. Today we are speaking on the changing world, and world is not going to be like it was before. And I see that even yesterday changes announced here by by former Prime Minister of the UK, what did Trump in the United States. Maybe all these things are coming from the fundamental changes in the world's economy. You know. We were mentioning today that the inequality is growing up here.
Yep.
We were mentioning that the FDI inflows into the developed countries are getting bigger and bigger than to the not developed countries, you know. And now you are mentioning that there are technological changes also, and these measures of protections, maybe they are going to protect the technology now, because the world was technology producers and users is going to be evolved between them, maybe, probably, we don't know. And thank you to share with us your view. So I'm asking the audience, if you have any questions, please.
Thank you very much, Qais Mohammadi from Afghanistan. You said that if there is a competition of corruption, you will win, but I say no, we will win, you will not. When it comes to copying or somehow following other countries and their practices in terms of fighting corruption in our country, we have been doing that for a while. I'm working for Customs Department, and you know that's the most.
That's the worst. Yes. Customs. I think customs is same everywhere. It's just.
Yeah, definitely. So we had a delegation coming to your country. They visited, and we also got some copies, and we went to your websites, copied some of the strategic plans and all those things. in order to draft a national counter-corruption strategy for Afghanistan. But it didn't work. Maybe it wasn't because the strategies were not right, but it was because we didn't have a national unity in implementing that strategy. I want to know the core reason because of which you could counter corruption in your country, which is not policies, definitely, which is something maybe different, like you have a unity or you have a single political thought that you will have to do this thing. What was that?
Actually, about Afghanistan, yes, it's a very difficult country. I've been there, by the way, many times. I had a contract there just recently. We have a very short contract. We have a 4-month contract with the president's office, President Ghani's office. I met him a few times, and he's a very impressive guy, by the way. I was very impressed with him. Although I have to say that the situation is not easy, and I believe that it will take long time for Afghanistan to achieve similar results that we've done in Georgia for different reasons. Amongst others, yes, there is no unity in the country, and this is the problem of not having unity. If you're asking what we've done in Georgia to fight corruption successfully, I believe that there are a few major aspects. It's not one aspect. One is that because we were so corrupt, Georgia was so corrupt, actually government was given a full mandate saying that do whatever you want, just get rid of corruption. The population was really fed up. And what happened in 2003, actually, this, I don't know if you know or not, Rose Revolution happened, which was not fully revolution, but a quasi-revolution, where actually population came out in the streets and said, get rid of corruption, do whatever you want. For example, and we did drastic measures, which I believe you need to do in Afghanistan. And there are very rare countries where I advise drastic measures. And Afghanistan is one of them. Maybe maximum 5 countries that are in the world right now where I would advise to do drastic measures. And what do I mean by drastic measures? For example, we fired every single traffic policeman in 1 day.
Wow.
All of them. And by the way, traffic was much better. Without traffic policemen, traffic was much better. We had 3 months without traffic policemen. And we recruited totally new people from nowhere, from zero. In energy sector, I fired 3,000 people. And I especially brought as a heads of companies, non-energy people. The worst directors of hospitals are doctors. The worst directors of energy companies are energy engineers. You need to bring managers who will actually fight against corruption rather than specialists of that particular field. For example, customs. When I became Minister of Finance, the only reason why I became Minister of Finance was customs, actually. Because I fought very successfully corruption in energy sector, and I was given this task to become Minister of Finance, only to get rid of corruption in customs. And it was really the worst corrupt. I mean, literally, they would actually put cash on a table at the end of the day and kind of divide up cash between each other. I mean, literally, this was the case. So what we did here, in customs, we had a different approach, and corruption lasted longer than in police. Why? In customs, we said that we cannot fire all of them because this is some kind of knowledge. So we have to bring new guys. So what was happening is that new guys were brought. The old guys realized that new guys are there to replace them, and old guys would teach corruption to new guys, and we would actually put in prison new guys because they were inexperienced, and we would catch them. So I had to replace big part of customs. That's one. Second, I had to get rid of brokers. Brokers are biggest corruption in your country. Why? Because it's official corruption. But I don't know of custom brokers. I don't know of a custom broker who is not either member of family of customs officer or ex-customs officer himself. Yeah. And this is done. So I get rid of brokers. That's 2. Third, what I did there, I created special department which would go to neighboring country, Azerbaijan, for example, bring products with a camera and give a bribe to customs officer. If customs officer with a camera, if customs officer takes a bribe, he goes to prison for 5 years. That's very clear. Everybody knew that. They said, that's it. Everybody knows that if you take a bribe, you go to prison for 5 years. It's $100 bribe, $120 bribe. Second version is the customs officer doesn't take a bribe, but still customs clears the goods. So we have him for another checkup for future. Third is customs officer doesn't take a bribe and calls special department saying that he's been offered a bribe. At that moment, minister calls him with a thanking. He gets a 4 months bonus, 4 months salary bonus, and he gets promotion. Within 6 to 9 months of practicing this, I had the cleanest customs department in the world. So I mean, I can tell you many, many stories, and there are very particular cases for each particular department, how we fought corruption. But the main idea is the following. Main idea is that if your customs officer or your agency specialist, doesn't matter, whoever, earns $20 a month, which was the case in Georgia in the past, don't expect him not to take bribes. He has to survive. And if this person looks in a mirror in the morning and says that if I don't take bribe, my family will starve to death, that's it. He will take a bribe because nobody, otherwise it's impossible. And there was kind of social consensus in Georgia that, yeah, of course they have to take bribe. Otherwise, how can they survive? And you have to take away this moral argument. It has to be immoral to take bribes. And you can only achieve that if he has normal salary. That's one. Second, bonuses. Give bonuses to public servants. If they take bonuses for better services, they will not take bribes. And third, very strong stick. If we're talking about carrots and sticks, if they take bribes, they go to prison. Doesn't matter who they are. They are brother or sister or of a prime minister or whoever it is. They take a bribe, they go to prison. That's the basic rule.
Okay. Any other question? Please.
Hello, my name is Alex. I'm from Germany. You mentioned that now Georgia had, or the last survey you mentioned, they had 4% had paid a bribe to someone, and you mentioned a couple of other big countries who had a similar or slightly higher rate. Do you believe it is possible to achieve a lower than 2% corruption rate? Or is that just...
I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's possible. I think that corruption will always be. It's just a matter of level of corruption. I believe that somebody somewhere will always give some bribe. It's impossible to totally root it out from everybody. Even a clean country like Germany has problems. And we've seen problems of one of the largest companies, of German companies in Africa. We've seen one of the cleanest non-corrupt countries, by the way, is South Korea, and we've seen corruption scandals in South Korea. So it's impossible to totally root it out. Something there will be there, but the main question is how much does it affect economy? How much does it affect society? How much it pushes back the country's development? And where we were talking about countries like Afghanistan, where we were talking countries like Africa, and many, many countries in Africa, we are talking that corruption actually stops development of these countries, doesn't allow these societies to grow, to develop. And this is the biggest problem right now, I think, for the world.
Okay.
Yep.
Please.
Yeah, my name is Esteban. I am the director of the ICB. Well, I'm not gonna, what you spoke about this case in Afghanistan regarding, for example, to take away people from engineers, for example, from energy and so on. In these cases, I'm not going to go through because I don't have the knowledge over that. But I think, of course, I know that it shouldn't be so radical, because it should be. I think it should be a balance at the end. Because, for example, I'm going to give you one example. I did one Erasmus in Finland, and for example, in Finland, the people who is in charge of the education are mainly professors. And as you may know, is one of the most successful, educational systems in the world.
Yep.
I think it should be a balance. I always say one thing: if I'm going to the if I have a pain in my teeth, I'm going to the dentist, and if I have a problem with my car, I'm going to the mechanic. I never do the opposite. I'm going to the dentist for a problem with my
Definitely.
car.
But do you know who is the owner of the dentist? Do you know who is the owner of that building?
be an investor
Yeah.
or whatever else. Yeah, but the expert who is treating me directly
Absolutely.
is a dentist.
Absolutely. It does not mean that the manager who manages the salaries, who manages the policies, who that has to be a dentist. It doesn't mean, believe me.
No.
And maybe,
Now I understand.
maybe yes, please don't misunderstand.
I
Where,
wanted to make clear.
yeah, absolutely. So it's all about policy decision making, which I'm saying that it doesn't have to be dentist, doesn't have to be doctor, doesn't have to be an engineer. It has to be good manager.
Thank you.
Okay, any other question? Please.
Yeah, Joseph from California, United States. Thank you for sharing your story, and then also, of course, your very successful reforms. My question would be, what would be the dangers or the threats or obstacles for, as we know, the majority of the world, which is in the red in transparency and corruption, that leaders will face in implementing your playbook?
Very good question. And I have to say that the biggest obstacle that was to us when we were doing reforms, it was our own bureaucrats, our own government members, our own deputy ministers, our own heads of agency. You see, in nature, bureaucrats are risk averse. In nature, if you are risk taker, you go to private sector. Bureaucrats are in nature risk averse, one, and second, in nature, they don't like changes, any kind of changes. They are scared of changes. So every time when we are advising prime minister to do the reforms, I am always finishing my presentation with one sentence. By the way, the biggest problem you're going to face, it's not going to be population, it's not going to be opposition, it's not going to be parliament, it's going to be your own ministers and deputy ministers. So you have to win the war against your own ministers, deputy ministers, and bureaucrats, and only after that you'll be able to do the reforms. So in order to do these reforms, you need two things. One, you need political will at the top, that he wants to change, and second, you need to have team afterwards who will actually implement this, who will be on your side. In Georgia was very lucky at that time that these few things happened at the same time. We had a very capable head of state who wanted to change. We had a very capable team who actually implemented this, and we had a huge support from society, from whole country to do that. So that's why, can you imagine firing all traffic policemen? I mean, all of them came out in the streets, and it's, by the way, it's a dangerous thing, don't do that. Because they have guns at the same time, so they can actually create a revolution. They came out, all of them in the streets, and started protesting. But within 2 hours, they went home because they realized that nobody was supporting them. They were so much hated by society that they actually got scared and they went home. They realized that there was no chance that they could do anything. So, I mean, this support from population, political will, and capable team is a formula for that. And the biggest opposition, the biggest obstacle will be the government's itself, in itself, bureaucrats, second layer bureaucrats most of the time.
So, any other question? I have a question, Nika.
Yes.
You know, I was the prime minister of Armenia making these liberal reforms at the very beginning of 90s. And
Yep.
Armenia was #1 in the world. Unfortunately, we had economic growth in 1994, and then we have energy sector reform. We became exporter of electricity, but because of some political reasons, late 90s, Armenia changed its policy and became less and less attractive on that. And in my lectures, I'm including special chapter on Georgia, showing what happened. But I see 3 problems in Georgia. I would like to know your opinion to those problems. The first one is extreme poverty, 8%. Poverty generally 20%. Extreme poverty is
7, actually 4.
8. I know 8.
Okay.
I know the database of 2016 is 8.9.
Okay.
Okay. The second issue in Georgia, which is not solved, how you solve you bring down the taxation. You have something like different taxes, 16, now you have 4, just 4.
Yep.
It is clear, it is transparent. But after that, you had a relative decrease of the revenues of the budget. To be frank with you, we cannot improve it too much. Because of that, you have very low level of salaries. And the third issue is the structure of the economy, which is now very well specialized on tourism, etc., etc. And having a look to the less structured technology, etc., I didn't feel too much that is going better. Could you share
Sure.
with us your point of view
Absolutely.
on these three questions?
Absolutely, very good, very good three questions. First of all, let me start with taxes.
Yeah.
Yes, we brought down taxes. By the way, we had 21 different taxes. All of them were crazy high. We realized that no company can pay them all. It was specially done. It was because of corruption. You cannot pay all of them, but you pay how much, depending on how much bribe you give to a tax officer. So actually, paying taxes was very simple in Georgia. Tax officer comes to you and you discuss, you actually bargain how much you will give him as a person and how much you pay taxes. So we brought down 21 taxes. We brought down to 6, now it's to 5. We have right now 5 taxes, all of them are flat, all of them are low. And tax revenue to GDP went from 7% to 24%. Okay? It's according to the World Bank figures. In nominal terms, we collected within 5 years' time, we collected 10 times more taxes than before the reform. Before we had 21 taxes, and when we changed this reform, all tax rates were brought down at the same time. So nothing went up. So with this, only due to taking out corruption, only due to Laffer curve, effect, and only due to better administration, we started collecting more. Now, government salaries are not high, but they're not very low either. I wouldn't believe that they are very low. But we have very good bonus system. Now, it was my decision when I was prime minister. We saw that good guys of the government were leaving for private sector. And it was a big problem because we didn't want to let them go. But at the same time, we couldn't take salaries high up to everybody because it was a huge budgetary burden. And we would go above 30% of budget to GDP. And I believe that countries like Georgia cannot go above 27, 28% of budget to GDP because it has its own big effect on the economy, bad effect on the economy. So what we did, we created a bonus system. So I believe that in any ministry, only 5 people work. Doesn't matter how big the ministry is. Only 5 people work, and you need to keep these 5 people happy. These are the decision makers, okay? Everybody else work on these 5 people, or don't do anything. Most of the time, don't do anything. So for these 5 people, actually, we create a special bonus system. And these bonuses are very high, and they are happy. They don't leave the governments. About poverty, I think I have different figures of the World Bank. According to these figures, only in 2 years' time, extreme poverty. Only in 2 years' time, it's period of 2010-2012, extreme poverty went down from 7% to 4%. Only in 2 years' time. And I'll tell you, and right now it remains around 4%. Of course it's the case. But I believe that we have quite interesting system. So we had all the different type of social benefits. Social benefit for single mothers, social benefit for families with 4 children and more, social benefits for people who used to have a war in Second World War, and so on and so on. So we had like 20, any kind of social benefits, but all of them were very, very small, okay? So what we did, we said that we totally scrapped this social benefit system, and we said, whoever is poor will get the social benefit. That's it. And how we identified that, we create a formula which I believe works quite well, which right now World Bank wants to use this formula in other countries as well. It's actually based on your income, because you cannot really identify true income in developing countries. So it's based on your costs and your ownership. Costs of your electricity, gas, mobile phone, of your bills, and of your ownership, whatever you own. Based on that, we identified poorest part of society, approximately, if I remember properly, 20% of the population, because we had that much money for them. We gave them cash, and we gave them health care vouchers and insurance. So with that, we pulled out extreme poverty From 7%, we decreased it to 4%. I believe that this government has a very good chance to take it one step further and totally eliminate extreme poverty if they continue with the same policy, but little bit increase the cash benefits.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Gilauri.